Welcome back to GMA3. The airline industry is gearing up for a busy summer travel season less than 2 weeks after a federal judge lifted the federal mask mandate on planes.
Let's bring in now to discuss this international president of the Association of Flight Attendants Union, Sara Nelson. Good to have you here back on the show with us. So it sounds like great news. No more mask mandate on the planes, and what a relief for the flight attendants now. Don't have to play mask police, but you kind of have some mixed feelings about it.
So, you know, it was a collective sigh of relief because this has been a really hard 2 years. Not only flight attendants having to wear masks for 15, 16-hour days while they're going through all the flights that they go to and from the hotel, but enforcing that with people who were constantly being difficult and making our jobs just really, really hard. But we also heard from people who were very concerned because they're immunocompromised or they have small children at home. And we heard from other flight attendants who said, I'm just going to keep wearing my mask. But we have to remember that we're all in this together because the conflict that we have seen on our planes hasn't just been about masks. It's been about people really saying that they're not going to follow any kind of rules. And we just want to remind the public that we're here for your safety and we're going to continue to work to keep you safe.
And you do such a great job at that, Sara. I want to point out the moment when the mask mandate was lifted. In some cases, it happened mid-flight and chaos ensued, correct?
Yes. You know, the way that this was communicated, whether you were for or against having the mask mandate, the way that it was communicated was abysmal. People took off with one set of rules that they thought were in place, and in the middle of the flight, when they can't walk away, can't get away from this situation, it was communicated right there on board. And that is just a recipe for chaos and real conflict. And it was really unfair to the people on the front lines. The flight attendants who were in the middle of enforcing the mask mandate, suddenly there was an announcement across the system saying, oh, it's gone now. And it just really undermined our position that the airlines could have done a much better job in communicating this and giving us a 24 or 48-hour lead-in so that everyone knows what the rules are and can comply with them.
And you mentioned there chaos and conflict, and I know you don't have, we haven't had that long to have the mask mandate lifted on planes, but are you seeing or hearing back that there's any change of the experience for flight attendants in dealing with passengers? Like you said, all the conflicts and things on the planes didn't just have to do with masks, but are you seeing any type of change?
Look, we're still seeing the conflict, and the reality is that when the FAA was announcing all those numbers of people who were being unruly, that included a lot of people who were just refusing to comply, who were making it very difficult, but they weren't necessarily moving to a violent place. Most of the violent incidents have come from other situations, other safety instructions that have had nothing to do with masks. And so since the mask mandate was lifted, we've still had these incidents going on. We've had flight attendants who've been slapped, who have been have continued to be subject to homophobic and racial slurs, sexist slurs. And so that is continuing with a small handful of people. The vast majority of people just want to have a safe, uneventful flight, and we want to continue to lift up that spirit that we're all in this together.
Yeah, and I think the majority of people would agree with you on that, Sara. And there were some changes that were made during this pandemic, but as we're starting to move out of this pandemic phase, are there some changes that you believe should remain permanent as we head forward?
Well, look, the FAA announced immediately the day after the mask mandate was lifted that their zero-tolerance policy will stay in place forever. It is permanent now. And so this is sending the message that if you act out on a plane, you're not going to get a second chance. You can't put everyone at risk. You can't put everyone's lives at risk and just walk away and that be okay. You have to follow the rules because the only way we can do this thing that's the magic of flight is if we all do it together. You know, you can't bring a gun or a knife into my workplace. You have to practically undress to show you're not a security threat. And you have to follow our instructions when that seatbelt sign is on, because if you unbuckle, you could be thrown to the ceiling, and when you come down, you could land on other people and hurt them too. So it really requires all of us following those rules and looking to the flight attendants for those instructions to stay safe.
Delta this week announced it became the first major airline to announce that it will begin paying flight attendants for boarding the plane versus the standard operation, which is to pay flight attendants once the door is closed. Tell us what that impact will have on those flight attendants and if you think other airlines will follow suit.
Well, look, this is an issue that we have been working on for a very long time, but we haven't really been able to advance our demands at the negotiating table for the last 20 years because we were in a period of austerity following 9/11 and all the crisis and bankruptcies and mergers that happened after that. So this is a clear demand from flight attendants. There is a petition out there that has hundreds of thousands of signatures, which means that it's not just flight attendants signing it, it's the general public supporting us. Flight attendants feel really good about that, and it's good that we have an organizing drive at Delta, and they felt like they needed to respond and try to make the argument that flight attendants don't need a union, so we're going to give you half your hourly rate for that boarding time. That sets a new standard, and that's actually why we organize, so that we can raise the standards for everyone. I expect while we're at the negotiating table this year that we're going to see boarding pay as a standard operating procedure at all airlines, and hopefully we can improve upon that and not just make it half-time pay, but actually full-time.
Yeah, it's surprising for a lot of us to hear that that was the case, or that's what the industry had been paying at this point. TJ and I are both about to board a flight later today, so we will be sure to thank our flight attendants. International President of the Association of Flight Attendants Union, Sara Nelson, thank you for always being a friend of the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy and TJ. Really appreciate it.
All right, coming up here on